Darling, sweet honey dear, won't you come over here and touch me just like you used to? Oh, touch me.
Hi everyone, and welcome back. In today's video I'm going to be doing the most requested video that I've ever had. So it is going to be all about degrafting, as the title would suggest. Because it's a fairly complex subject, what I'm going to be doing is focusing on one particular type of degrafting, and so for this one it will be about degrafting from Pereskiopsis. Now, degrafting from Pereskiopsis is a little bit more complicated just due to the way that the stock becomes embedded in the scion over time. So you'll see even throughout the video I do have a few little stumbling blocks, but it's something that comes with practice, and if you take your time and you're careful, it's realistically not too difficult. Now, predominantly doing Arioses in the video, however you will also see a couple of Astrophytum degrafts. Now, the Astrophytum degrafts are much easier to do, and that comes down to the way in which I graft Astrophytum to Pereskiopsis. There's two schools of thought when it comes to grafting, and the first is that you should cut the seedling in such a way that you can graft the top portion and the bottom portion. So you basically cut the seedling in the middle in half. I don't do that for two reasons. The first is I find that reverse grafts, that being the tail end where the roots come from, never grow as well, especially when you're working with seedlings. So I think it's a waste of time. And also I generally graft seedlings as small as I possibly can. And so sometimes it is completely impractical or impossible even to graft the top and the bottom, because the seedling is generally so small that I really only have one place that I can make the cut. The added benefit of doing it my way is, as you'll see with the Astrophytum degraft, is that it's one clean cut, because you've got so much of a neck on the seedling that you can make that cut without having to core out the seedling, or the scion I should say, when you're degrafting it. So it makes it much easier. This doesn't apply to things like Astrophytum mysterias. I'm more so talking about Myriostigma ornatum, those sorts of ones. The asterias will almost always have the Pereskiopsis embedded in the body of the plant. So you will have to do the core method, and that is taking out the cutting sort of a cone shape into the scion. It's a fairly daunting project to undertake, but it is one of necessity. Pereskiopsis, whilst is generally viewed as being a short-term stock, it can support a scion for quite a number of years. I've got a Lophophora, which I'll put a picture up of, and it's been grafted to Pereskiopsis, admittedly quite a long stalk, which I use much shorter stalks now, but on this particular one it was quite a long stalk, and it's been growing on it for I don't know, maybe 5 or 6 years now. I don't know exactly, but a very long time. It's going to come off next spring for sure, because it's starting to pup, which I don't want. So it can be used long term. However, after the second year it will generally slow down. So on the Arioses examples that we've got coming up, you'll see they're already starting to throw roots. On one of the examples, that's because the Pereskiopsis has actually started to die, and it's dying internally inside the scion. This will usually happen after a year or two in few cases. It's not very common, but it can happen. And then the other reason that it will happen is that the scion is not receiving as much nutrition and water and things like that from the stock that it would like. So it thinks, well, hang on a minute, I'm going to go out on my own here, which is perfectly fine as well. So generally what you'll have is you will graft in, say, one spring or summer in the height of the growing season. The scion will stay on that stock plant for 2 full seasons. In the first season, you're going to get the most growth. In the second season, the growth will slow, but it will still be quite reasonable and an acceptable level. And then the following spring is when you'll actually degraft. So you're looking at around 2.5 years in total that for the most part is when the scion will stay on the stock plant. Of course, this can be changed. So in the examples that we're seeing in the video, we're looking at a little over 1-year-old scions that we're degrafting. And I'm doing that because they're producing roots, which we'll see. But then, you can also leave them on for longer if they're not growing, fast enough in those first two seasons. So you might leave them on for 3 or 4 years and then take them off. But the general accepted view is that 2 years of growth on Pereskiopsis, after which they come off. But you can tinker with that as you need to and as is applicable. You just need to keep an eye on the scions, see how they're going. I mean, have a look. If they're producing roots and they're a reasonable size, well, why not take them off? They're going to look better on their own roots. Get a more natural appearance quicker. So, I mean, one of the examples, the scions are quite small, but it's one of those multi-headed ones, and it just ends up getting so messy, which you'll see. So I don't mind that they're a little bit smaller. They've got some good healthy roots, so I'd much rather them be growing on their own. I don't want to stall or prevent that root growth from happening, so I just decided to take them off. I think it's a better long-term solution than going, oh, well, I want to get an extra, 1 or 2 centimeters of growth or however much. So I think you just, in that instance, you're just leaving them on the Pereskiopsis for the sake of it. So you just sort of need to evaluate what's going to be most beneficial and what's most applicable based on how your grafts are performing. Now, I briefly mentioned, I don't go into a lot of detail in the video because I wanted to focus more on the practical element, and that is where to cut and how to cut. But the method that I mentioned briefly is where you cut a very small, you cut the stalk so it's got a very small stalk of Pereskiopsis, and then you plant that directly into the media so that the scion is actually touching the soil. I don't like it. I mentioned that later on in the video, and the reason that I don't like it is, the reason that I don't do that is I've got no idea of knowing when the scion's making its own roots, when the Pereskiopsis dies, and quite frankly, if the Pereskiopsis, well, when it dies, not if, but when it dies, in my opinion, it presents a rot hazard. I don't want, a piece of plant matter that's embedded, often 3/4 of the way into a scion. I don't want that dying and then rotting out. So I'd rather just get rid of it entirely. Now, I'm quite a frequent reader or viewer of cactus forums and pages and things like that. I don't often weigh in for various reasons, but I do read a lot, and I often look at the answers that people get to the questions that they post. And look, there's a lot of great information online about cactus, but there's also a lot of I'll just say it bluntly, a lot of really bad advice. And I'll include this particular example because it's relevant to the topic. I could do a whole video of bad cactus advice, so if that's something you might find interesting, let me know, and I'll hunt around and find some terrible advice and explain why it's terrible. But anyways, this particular example, it was a question posted on a forum or a page, I don't remember exactly where, and it was somebody asking how to go about degrafting a cactus from Pereskiopsis. Now, the person who answered this question did have some level of understanding because they knew that the Pereskiopsis would be embedded in the scion. It does get embedded quite high up, and this is especially true of single heads. When it does the multi-headed thing, it's a little bit different there because you've got this big... When it does the multi-headed thing, what actually happens is there sort of becomes this sort of mass that's attached to the Pereskiopsis, and then the heads come off that. So it's not such a problem because you're not going to do anything with the mass because it's basically just like this big lump. So you don't have to worry about that. But anyways, with the single heads, the Pereskiopsis becomes embedded, and it becomes embedded quite deeply. We're talking sometimes 1/2 to 3/4 of the way into the body of the plant. So this person understood that element, but their advice was to cut the scion clean in half. So, I mean, yes, admittedly, that will remove the Pereskiopsis, but it also completely neutralizes the benefit of grafting. I don't understand why you would graft something only to cut off half of the growth that you've achieved. It doesn't make any sense. The other pitfall to degrafting that way, and I don't recommend it in any capacity, is that you are then exposing that scion to a massive surface area that's been cut, and it can literally lose so much moisture that it cannot recover from it. The method that I use is the core method. I don't really have a proper name for it. It's just something that I've picked up and I was taught from very experienced and very talented growers. And that is that what you're wanting to do is cut a cone shape out of the scion, working from the Pereskiopsis, and you'll see it in closer detail in the video. What you then do is you're removing all of the Pereskiopsis, which is necessary, but you're also not removing any of the growth. So you're still getting that full growth in the full body of the plant without any damage to it. The damage will be inside of the plant, which will heal over, and then the roots will come out of that cone, and they make their way down and they find the soil. So that's the method that I use, and it's the method that I also recommend. Anyways, I'll get on with the actual practical demonstrations of degrafting, and then in the near future I'll do some other types of degrafting. So degrafting from things like Trichoceros pachinoi, Cereus, and then also Trichoceros spacianus. For today, it's just going to be about Pereskiopsis, which is my preferred grafting stock for seedlings. I don't use anything else, but I thought it's about time you guys and girls should see how you actually go about getting them off the Pereskiopsis, because there is a massive amount of videos on how to graft, but basically 0 videos on degrafting. So I hope you find the video helpful and useful. If you have any questions, definitely do let me know. But otherwise, on with the show.
Lady, sweet honey dear, that smile on your face, bring it over here and kiss me. just like you used to.